There you go.
Right.
Hello again. That's a
Namo.
bit better, I think. Namo Mitabatsu. I think that's a bit better now.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear, no delays. That's what it needed. I just needed to reboot my router. It had been a while since I did that, so there we go.
All right. So
Right.
I think you had a question about
Yes.
Tannisho
So,
you wanted to discuss?
well, it's more of a overall. It's not just Tannisho.
Hmm.
It's about things like Tannisho, which is very strong. And there's an additional question about Tannisho itself in this, but
Hmm.
let me give you
Great.
the bigger question that I have. So Tannisho, it's very strongly addressing the divergences, and very, you know what I mean? It's a very strong kind of, and there's a lot of that.
Lamenting.
What's that? Sorry.
Lamenting.
Yes, lamenting. Yes, lamenting. It's very, and there's some of that in Shinron's writings as well of kind of urgency and the lamenting,
Hmm.
or just when the teaching is has gone astray, you know. Um, so there's this very strong element of that going on in the teachings. And then on the other hand, as you begin to really deeply listen and are enabled to deeply listen by Amida and things get illumined by Amida, you start to see the 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 I guess the kind of, even though it's inconceivable, you see the bigger truth about Amida Buddha being the original Buddha of beginningless past,
Hmm.
and that he it was this was already it was already happening. You know what I mean? That it was already the original Buddhism is Amida Buddha's way. The original it always was kind of that other power. It kind of always was the compassion and wisdom coming from the Buddha side to all beings. We couldn't get it, so the Buddhas, the compassion and wisdom of the Buddhas, they provided tons of provisional paths to, okay, at least get them on the path, and then they'll get it,
Hmm.
you know. And then eventually
Basic
they said, okay,
teaching.
they're
Yeah.
still not getting it. Okay, Dharmakara time, Amida Buddha time, to give them
It's
really,
interesting. Did you know? I not to interrupt, but
yeah.
I was reading the in the Buddha's words, the uh, compilation of the Holy Canon, Suttas, compiled by the Buddha. Great book, by the way. Every Buddhist should. Um, and that in early Buddhism there was the concept of graded teaching,
Of
of
what?
graded teaching.
Graded teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, not in other words,
Grades.
it's not just something that was came later with Mahayana,
Yeah.
because we're very well aware of like Chantai, Tendai in Japanese, and the sort of categorization of sutras and so on based on you know eras of the Buddha's teaching and so on. But even in early Buddhism, the Mahayana sutras hadn't yet appeared. You had a sort of concept of a graded teaching that led the seeker to higher wisdom, to deeper truth.
Mm.
Starting
Hmm.
with, I was just reading this amazing sutta. It's like so good. I mean, I love reading the Pali Sutta to begin with, but this one I'd never read before. Wow, where um, the, somebody comes to the Buddha. Unfortunately, I don't have the book right. Yeah, but and yes, he starts to ask about things, and the Buddha says, so if I talk to you about this in terms of the past, you might have doubt, and if I talk to you about it in terms of the future, you might have doubts about that. So let's just focus on right here and now, and let's think about this question together. And I thought it was so cool because that's always how Shakyamuni, according to the early, literature, taught. He was almost like, I think the closest thing in Western culture that people would be broadly familiar with would be like, a Jewish rabbi. There's always that element of like questioning and probing and let's think about this together
Hmm. Hmm.
rationally, kind of
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah.
And that's how like this was, you know, way,
Way
in
back.
500
Yeah.
BCE or whatever,
Hmm.
um, in a totally different part of the world. The Buddha was, you know, putting into practice what we would kind of, or another thing we would
He was
recognize
already.
would be like
Yeah.
Socratic, the Socratic method, the
Mm.
questioning and working with a student. Let's learn together. Let's think together, and let's let's find the truth.
Yeah.
There's never, and that's why the Buddha challenges, and in this Sutta, he says, um, you need to investigate the Tathagata, the enlightened one.
Yeah.
You need to question, and then you need to confirm these things. And then once you can confirm
Exactly.
these things, then you
Yeah.
have, anyway,
Yep.
sorry.
No.
Bit of a side trail. Go ahead. Keep,
No, no, no,
keep
that's
coming.
no, that's great. That's no, it's great. Yeah, yeah, you need to verify that for yourself. You
Well, the
need
reason I
to,
mentioned that is
yeah,
because you were discussing um, the idea, in Shin Buddhism, we refer to Amida Buddha as, Kuonjo
yeah,
Jojitsu.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's
the
exactly what I was
Buddha,
referring
the
to.
ancient
Yeah,
past, um, and then Shakyamuni, like Shinran says, appeared, as Amida appeared. And Shakyamuni is actually the
yeah,
Nirmanakaya of Amida, which
yeah,
is unique to.
exactly.
And so I think from a purely historical perspective, you're going to be like, what? That doesn't make sense. Because people know, there's early Buddhism, and then Mahayana ideas developed later. And then, you
Yeah,
have the Mahayana Sutras, you have the larger sutra, et cetera, et cetera. So from a purely historical point of view, um, it's like, well, how can we say that, right? But actually, Soga Ryojin, who you might know or maybe not, but he was he's one of the more important modern Buddhist thinkers, actually from the denomination, and um, emphasized. And there's an article actually we could kind of walk through because I think it would answer some of your questions on this topic. But Sogo Ryojin emphasized, we can't understand Buddhism simply through a historical critical framework because
it, yeah,
that
it,
will just arrive at a lot of archaeological facts. And
yeah,
he emphasized we need to understand Shakyamuni in the context of eternal truth
exactly.
that was
The
preceding him
bigger
and
pic,
came after.
yeah, the bigger
And that's
picture.
present. That concept is
The,
present even in early
yeah,
Buddhism because
yeah,
Shakyamuni is just one Buddha
exactly.
in a succession of
It
Buddhas.
is
He says,
exactly. Yeah,
I arrive I arrived at the truth in the same way that
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah,
And there maybe wasn't
exactly.
yet a concept of Buddhas existing at the same time.
Yeah,
That kind of came with
yeah,
Mahayana thought,
yeah.
but you know, there's this flow, right, of truth, of, of the
Yep.
Dharma, in which Shakyamuni. And so we need to be careful that we don't just take a merely historical,
Yeah, I definitely am not.
viewpoint.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, doing
that's
that.
that's a
I'm
good
going the
thing.
other
I mean,
way.
there's
I'm starting out with the other.
yeah,
I'm saying, look,
exactly.
do we have the
Yeah,
bigger picture? Yeah,
yeah,
and once you have that, and you look at, that Shakyamuni's Nirmanakaya is just, that's the Nirmanakaya cycle for our sort of Buddha, age of a Buddha. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's hit that, and countless billions, zillions of Buddhas before in multiple different universes and worlds, and you
As
know, as
numberless as the
yeah,
sands of the Ganges.
exactly,
That's
have
how I
been
would say.
doing the same cycle, and coming to the same end of talking about Amida Buddha and the Pure Land, in the end, and that, ultimately bringing uh, beings that way. So on the one hand, so this is what I'm trying to get to.
Mm.
You have this broad teaching, and, and Amida illumines that, so you can kind of, within your own karmic causes and conditions and limitations, grasp that to some level, however inconceivable. And you can see that. So along with that, when it comes to Amida's working,
Hmm.
I personally have gotten to the point where, and this is what's been happening with recent reflections I've done, and some videos
Mm.
I've made actually of my reflections. I don't limit Amida's power now. Like, I don't. I,
Yeah.
it, you know, the working of the vow, Amida's working, the working of the of the Buddha, of
Mm.
beginningless past.
Yeah.
I don't. There's no limit to that, to how that gets
Right.
worked out in beings' lives, how
Yep.
that power, Amida's transference of merit, Amida's good from the past, how all that gets worked out. There's no limit to it. And so, and you start to see how even the provisional practices arise out of that
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an
original
important point.
original compassion.
Shinran emphasizes that the all teachings are actually arise from the great
Yes,
compassion of
yes.
Tao,
And that's in
including
yeah,
including ones termed provisional and so on.
yes. And that's in the teachings. That's, it's,
Yeah.
it took me a while to kind of get, to get there. Amita took a while for Amita to get, to get me there, but I got there. I could see it. And so which is kind of surprising with my imagination. I have a pretty, vivid, kind of expansive imagination, and but with some of the things with the teachings, it just took a long time for the water on stone to start wearing down some things. But anyway, so that kind of makes me not be too, that makes me feel like I'm part of a bigger sangha too. Like, all these people are really under Amita's care. All these beings in every direction, who are and who are at, whatever times
Yeah.
Buddhist, they're all Amitas, and they're actually the, working a path that is a provisional skill and means path that's been provided to
Right.
get them eventually to.
Yeah.
Do you see what I
It's
mean?
like yeah, it's like Shinron says, you know, each being individually is guided and cultivated and led by the
Yes.
Tathagata.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
feel like, so I'm part of, not only am I a part of what you're saying, and then it makes me relax about, other, the whole, well, they're doing self-power practices and we don't do, I don't, it just makes me kind of relax about that and say, you know what? We're all Buddhists,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
it's all in Amita's hands. It's all in Amita's, you know, it's all the vow
yeah.
power of Amita. So I don't need
And
to
even on
worry.
a
Yeah. Don't need to worry about them. And then also when, even, and there's a thing in the teachings, right? Even in Tannisho, where it says, we'll learn from when people get it wrong. We'll learn from the divergences. We'll
yeah,
actually, because and that makes sense to me now too, because that's in the
mm,
power and the working and the skill and means of Amida.
yeah,
And
yeah,
who knows when this someone that's and this is a whole nother aspect of it, is who knows when someone's, good from good from the past, present, and the future is turned into the highest good by a meta,
Yeah.
that includes someone diverting even. Do you see what I mean? To so that
Yeah. Well,
other beings can kind of get it from
totally,
that side,
totally.
from a different
I,
side. Or do you see what I mean? Like, so it just,
yep.
so there's these really strong, so on one hand, what I'm trying to say is, on the one hand, you have these really strong, like, the transmission must be done correctly, and lamenting the divergences, and these are deplorable aspects of stuff going on the Sangha with these teachings and these people. And then Shinran disowns his own son, and
Yes.
because of that, and there's this really
Yes.
strong thing. But then you have the other side of it, and I go, it's, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's in Amada's hands. There's this bigger
Yeah.
thing going on. You see what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And I think it's important
So
to
that's my question:
note.
is kind of
Mm,
how does that come to the how does that
yeah.
get reconciled within the teachings? How does that? Do you see what I mean? Or how does that?
Yeah.
What's the
Um,
balance with that? What's the? Do you see what I mean?
yes, I think you've answered it already, but I'll see if I can add anything to your mind. Um, the only
I
thing I would
promise
add,
this is not a scripted, you know, well, I'm going to ask
um,
this question so we can get this teaching across. It's not that. It's the Gankai channel is always unscripted, unrehearsed, teleprompter
yes.
free. I promise you. Anyway.
Um, so so you emphasize, you've come to this realization of the expansiveness of the vow,
Yeah.
the working of other
And
powers.
the name, Namo Amida Butsu, that
And
just,
Shinron, yeah,
yeah.
Namu, and Shinron says that there is, you know, um, I forget if it's I think it's self power within other power. So people, for example, following the vow where it encourages people to do good deeds and then transfers the merit and so on and so forth, right? Um, he refers to that as self power within other power.
Yeah.
So self power is within other power. That's it. Now, Tannisho, you have to remember what are the divergences here. So you like you said, this unlimited expansive power of the mouse. So um, those divergences in Tannisho, if you think about it, if you examine carefully each one, they're all attempts by human beings to limit that power, to limit the the working, the liberation, the salvation of the Buddha. So, for example, you can't be born in the Pure Land unless you repent every day, or you have to do such and such, or those who say a lot of
Yes.
nimbutsus will see a
Yes.
big Buddha, and those who don't say a lot of
Yes.
nimbutsus will see a tiny little Buddha, or they'll become
Yes.
when they're born in the Pure Land,
So
will be a bigger Buddha than
they're
other
all
Buddhas.
limits. They're all
They're all
limiting.
limits.
They're all
They're all
limits to the
placing
power.
limits on that
Yes,
power.
that's
So
true.
that's why that's the whole point of Tannisho.
Gotcha.
So if you read
Yeah, that
Shinron,
makes sense. Yeah.
there's no limit. There's no limit. But
There's
then
no limit. Sorry.
there you go. Um, and but as followers of Shinron started to argue and discuss and disagree, divergences. The divergence here is not necessarily between some supposedly pure and perfect teaching and then other. It's just the fact that people are having
Yeah, it's
different
whoa,
opinions.
differences, whoa, differences.
Yes.
Wild West over here. So
Yeah.
couldn't re-
Exactly.
couldn't resist
No,
no
we
country for
love it.
old men
We
reference
love
there.
to bring in the references. I mean, that's what we do. And
Anyway.
you know, I say that because people would say we only talk about Buddhism here, and yeah, well, Buddhism is everything. There's no, you can't,
Yeah.
you don't separate
Yeah.
the Dharma from the Dharma is reality.
Exactly.
We're
It's
not,
everywhere. Yeah.
we're not putting, so we're not putting things in a box. Anyway, um,
The Dharma is in the Dharmas.
yes.
The capital D is in the lowercase d's. Anyway.
And so what was I saying? Divergences, the nature of those. Yeah, so as people started to disagree about things, they're, you know, self-power thinking and the way we limit things as human beings started to creep back in, you know. These people say a lot of nifties, so they're going to be, when they're born in the Pure Land, they're going to be a big Buddha. And then these other people aren't saying they're in Butsu as much as they should be. So they're going to be a tiny, I mean, ridiculous stuff like that, right? And
They
then
actually are.
the author,
They
the
actually
author
are.
Tannisho points out, look, the Buddha has no color, no form, no, what are you talking about? Bigger and littler Buddha. The Tathagata, the Buddha is, completely beyond all of this,
Yeah.
these dichotomies and categories. So again, remember that Tannisho is all about um, bringing the teaching back to
Hmm.
getting rid of these delimiting
Le-
beliefs, these delimiting
Yeah. Yeah.
ideas that were being promoted regarding the
Yeah.
all powerful working of the vow, right? In the capacity of the name to save everyone, not just these good people over here,
Yeah.
these, whatever people, right?
It was
So
all
that's
whatever you look at it. Yeah, it was all limits in one way or another.
right. Yeah.
Limiting who,
Yeah.
limiting when,
Yeah.
limiting how, limiting, how
Yeah.
much, limiting.
Yeah.
It was all limits, limits, limits
Putting,
to the unlimited.
dampers
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
trying to contain or limit this, you know,
Expansive.
incredible other power, right? Which is completely beyond, you know. So primarily, and then there's also, people had the idea that, well, because we're saved by other powers, so we can do whatever we want. Mistaken ideas, harmful ideas that crept into, which Shinran was clearly against. So that's the whole point, I'd say, of Tony
Okay.
Show is you have to understand that those are limiting beliefs that are
Okay.
each from the point of view of the um, Gugong, the broad, the expansive vow, the vow that has there's room on board for everybody.
Mm. And so I guess that's also those were Shinron's words transmitted by Yenbo in Tannisho, but also in Shinron's direct writings that we have. He has,
Right. Yeah.
would it be a similar,
Yep.
would it correspond similarly? Any divergences that he or things he would point out that were incorrect teaching would be any limits
Yeah.
basically to him
Well,
in his
look
power.
at how look at how he criticizes the Shodomon, the passive sages of his day. Those people had this exclusive elite path to feeling good about themselves, essentially. That's how far it had been sort of corrupted. It actually, Shinron has great respect and quoted the founder of Tendai, Dogyo Daishi. Dogyo Daishi, wrote the Lamp of the Dharma, all of them and Shinron, has great respect for Dogyo Daishi, the founder of Tendai. But by Shinron's time, Dogyo Daishi, the spirit of Dogyo Daishi had kind of declined, and it was just this sort of, you know, bureaucratic way of making, putting people on top of other people. And so that's what Shinron was critiquing is this limited, Shodomon had become
Mm-hmm.
this limited, you know, we're walking
Yes.
the straight and narrow path, and everybody else is doing hell kind
Yes.
of thing.
Yes.
Instead of broad, everyone can, come to an experience the Buddha Dharma. So again, he was against that limiting idea.
That makes sense. And that's why it comes out so strongly, the
Yeah, and I don't.
becomes
Maybe it does in English translation. Actually, Tannisho is. I don't think of it as particularly strong and like a doctrinaire kind of sense. It's definitely, he says it's sad basically that we have all of
yeah.
these
Well,
things
lamenting.
that don't agree with what the
Yeah,
master
sorry, bear with me a
Shinran
second.
said.
Just need to switch chairs.
Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes things get lost in translation and especially tone and so forth. I mean, you can translate something in completely different tones, right? And one thing about Tannisho too is important to remember is it is a secondary source. Now, that's not to say that there isn't firsthand uh, memory and so on of Shinron in Tannisho, just as there is in Kakunyo Shonin's works like Shuji Sho and Gaija Sho and Kudensho. Those are all basically stories that it was Myoshin Shoni told Kakunyo Sho. Noshin Shoni was Kakunyo Shonin's uncle, I believe. I hope I'm getting all of this right from memory without reading anything. And then Yuinbo supposedly um, was also a student of Myoshin Shoni. So the point is that we know that Tannisho has Shinron's teaching in it because the same teachings are actually in Kakunyo Shonin's works.
Good.
So there's
Yeah.
two different sources that have the same stuff
Yes.
basically. But it's also important to remember that Tannisho was not written by Shinron. It's
E- Exactly.
a work of someone else who
Yeah.
heard, and then it's their understanding of
Mm.
Shinron. But if you read Shinron, you can see where it
It's
agrees.
matches up. Yeah, it matches up with his
Yeah.
writings and it matches up with these other writings. Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
Tannisho, is not
Which
accepted by
was I have to
all.
say was that's an old thing in me too. There's an
Mm,
old question there that needed, clearing from the
which
channels.
is,
What you just were talking about, the whole thing. Well, this is Yenbo
yeah, yeah.
saying this,
Well,
and it's so
the first half
strong,
of
and it's like, oh,
Tannisho.
but it does match up with Shinra. So I needed to
Mm, yeah,
hear that, what you just said. Basically, there was that little bit of question. It wasn't
yeah.
a huge one, but it was one that was just kind of there. Eventually,
The wonderment.
I'll ask about the. Eventually, I'll jump over the hedge with this one, and or I'll remember to
Yeah.
ask it,
Um,
and there it
yeah.
was. So it
Remember
was
in
also in
Tannisho. Oh,
this. That was
did
another
we
reason.
freeze here
Oh, I
from
froze.
time?
You froze now.
Uh,
You're frozen now. Am I frozen? Oh dear. Go off camera. Try that if you can hear me. I've gone off camera. Hello.
okay, we are
I guess
back.
we are back. I guess we'll do this as a two-parter. I
Yeah.
had no idea what just happened. When I tried to come back in, it said there was a meeting. There was still an
Oh,
ongoing
how
meeting. So
strange.
the other meeting must not have ended, but it kicked me out completely.
Huh.
No idea what's happened there. So anyway,
Well, we're
uh,
back
we're
for now.
back, and hopefully that
So,
other one will have been
yeah.
converted completely, the first meeting to recording. So, but
You could always edit them together
yeah,
too.
or just
So,
do two parts.
yeah.
Shorter videos sometimes get
So,
more.
okay. So, where
Yeah.
were we? What were we discussing?
Yeah. So we were just saying, that lesser part of the question that I had about the whole. This is
Yeah.
Yenbo's kind of,
Right.
you know, tr, you know, relating what Shinron said, what he remembered of what Shinron said, transmitting what Shinron had said. And I always had that question in the back of my mind, does this, how much of that was his own, I'll admit this, oh, you frozen again? Am I frozen? I think we're frozen again.
I think it'll catch up to
It'll
this.
clear up.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, how much of it, you know, was Yenbo's own sort of
Hmm.
interpretation of things,
Right.
and how much was, you know, and then you start to think, oh, it's very this sort of strong lamenting, the strong, however you want to put that the strong sadness, or
Hmm.
there's a strong kind of you know explanation of it, and you wonder, was that more Yenbo, or is that yeah, these are part of those questions, the questions
Yeah.
we have to be
I,
honest about and
the
deal with. And so,
lamenting, yeah.
but you saying, and I think I'd heard this before, that those writings match what another source,
Mm,
pretty closely. And also you can match it up with things that in Shinron's own
yeah.
writings. So all of that together, that kind of helps with
Yeah.
that question getting.
Yeah.
But that wasn't
And,
the main question. Is what I was saying. What
hmm.
but why such you know. But that makes sense that all the strong you know corrections, as it were, of the teachings are,
Yeah.
you are limiting what cannot be,
Yeah.
what is
Well, and
limitless.
also,
You
I
are
think too, I
you
mean,
are you know
we tend to revert to self
yeah,
as human beings.
yeah,
And that's what happens with the teaching too, is, you know, a teaching of pure other power, of absolute, unconditioned other power, has to be maintained. It doesn't just, because self power will come back in, and that's basically where you end up with stuff like all these different groups and
yeah.
online, whatever. You always see examples of this. It's,
Well, in one of my
self
previous
power creeping back
reflections,
in.
yeah, in my reflecting about this, and a video I made that I'll post before I post this one, is there's a particular group, or sect of Jodo Shinshu, where
Yeah.
they'll use a basically a meditation technique. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's actually is. I mean, that when there's a kind of the meditation technique where you let your thoughts, feelings, sensations, experiences come and go. They come,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a
I
there's
know.
a
I
there's
know
a
exactly what you're talking
and
about.
you refocus on the breath. So that's the
Yeah, it's
traditional. You
actually kind of
refocus on the
the
breath.
Zen
So you refocus.
understanding of
Yeah, exactly.
meditation.
It's a Zen. Yeah, exactly. It's a Zen
Yeah.
meditation technique. And I've seen this talked about in the same exact thing, or just about almost exactly the same. Yes, we,
Yeah.
just refocus on Amida, refocus on the Nimbutsu, which is,
Yeah.
so let your thoughts, feelings, sensations, experiences come and go like clouds, and refocus on
Yeah.
Nimbutsu, refocus on
Yeah.
Amida. And I'm like, and they claim it's not a meditation technique.
this sounds like this sounds
Yeah,
like Zazian.
yeah, exactly. And I said, so, and that's an example of, I think, where that self power comes in. And there's almost a
Yeah.
denial. There's a kind of denial that that's kind of coming
Mm.
from that end.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
coming from
That's
a,
a clear.
there's a
I
just
thought I thought
literally
that
a,
myself.
what's the denial, like a complete not seeing it,
Yeah.
that's what that is. What's that word, what is it called, the cognitive dissonance about
Yes. Yes.
you,
Yes.
or just a denial that that's what that is.
Yeah.
That's a good example of what you
Yeah.
just said, how
Yeah. It's a great example.
this
Yeah.
we have this tendency to
Yeah.
where self power comes in, and
Yeah.
I think with, and does that come, I don't know. And I
Yeah,
can't see
and
not seeing that as a self-powered,
well, it's
or
not
as
Jodo
a,
Shinshu. That's the
yeah,
important thing.
yeah.
I think what you have is you have people who. It's funny because they use the same terminology, but it's actually a different concept. The conceptual
Hmm.
framework is different.
Hmm. Yep.
It's similar to because I know exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about, and there's a lot of Jodo Shu, some of the schools that arose after Honan,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
they all emphasize different things,
Yep.
right? And that's partly what, Tannisho, like Shinron says, that the Pure Land teachers in the capital, meaning Kyoto, um, have, gone off in all kinds of different directions, from what
Yes.
Honan taught. Um, Now they would probably come back and say, "Well, so have you?" It's like you right. But anyway, so and now here's the thing. Okay, there's a school of Jodoshu where there is no absolute other power. There's always self power mixed when we
Mixed
see the
in.
ninbutsu.
Yeah.
There's always self. Yeah, and there's another school where it's not even focused on the ninbutsu. It's like all kinds of different practices can all be equally
In
directed
there.
toward virtuous
Yeah.
healing. So this is almost more like, you know, and so I mean, you have this wild um, range of teaching and interpretation of even Shonin. I mean, if you read Senjakushu, which you should, everybody should, in my opinion, because Senjakushu is Shonin's own words. It's
Hmm.
his pen. And I don't know if it's the only thing that we actually have, that he wrote, but it's close to. So it's the closest thing to what he actually taught, right? And this is what he gave to Shinron, and Shinron copied. He let Shinron copy, and
Hmm.
he actually
Hmm.
autographed it, to use modern lingo. Um, And so Senjakushu, is what Shonen taught. And if you read Senjakushu, it's like, oh, this is what Shinran taught. There are some,
Yeah.
differences and emphases and so on, but it's just the basic, um, teaching. The funny thing is that,
Yeah.
um, you
I think
know,
when you have when Amida is kind of
you know,
illuminating things, you're in that light. You can kind of see it back through all the Dharma masters. You can see
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
start to be able to see the original teaching there. You just see it. You're like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, it's um, and you can see the development of it, the kind of skillful means, kind of development of it, to
But
get
the
it to
reason,
where
people get confused with the group and the teacher you mentioned, which is that just say the ninbutsu and then let your thoughts come and go and let your good and bad feelings come and go. People get confused with that because
sensation.
it's like it's completely different concept from Shinji is the cause and
Yeah,
the Shinji, like Sogo Ryojin said, first Shinji, second Shinji, third Shinji. It's so important, right? That realization, and that's a different. So we're going to get into this in the next episode, hopefully, because we're going to talk about the Bible teaching. I
yeah.
actually had some text prepared because I thought we were going to talk about that,
Oh
but
yeah,
we'll get into
sorry.
this.
What that
It
I meant
it
to
all
say, we
comes
could still
down.
do that if, unless you wanted,
Yeah,
but this was a kind of burning one that's been
yeah, and that's
on my
great.
mind
I think
lately.
it's
And
good
you
to
always
discuss
said we should always go with the question that's, you know,
totally.
the
I
big
agree.
burning one. Yeah. So,
But to sort of preview, I guess, the
yeah,
upcoming discussion, we're going to really dig into the sutra and what it actually says, both the 18th vow and then the fulfillment passage, because
Mm,
they're
hmm.
both in the chapter on Shinjin. And then we'll be able to clearly see, oh, why do some people say this? Well, it's because they're not based on, you know, what Shinron is
Yes.
based on. They're
Yes.
not, you know, based on that, the larger sutra. If anything, I'd say they're more taking from the meditation sutra, and there's a lot of kind of complicated scholarship about, um, you know, of course, Shantou was primarily wrote his commentary based on the meditation sutra, and then Honen got his teaching from Shantou. But then Shinron brought in the perspectives of Donron and Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna,
Yep.
in the larger sutra, um, really kind of interpreted Honen and Shantou and the meditation sutra through the larger
I just
sutra. And that's why for Shinron, the larger sutra is the primary, um, which Honen, I think, also says. So, but that's a very complex issue of Shin Buddha scholarship, and there's a lot of varying opinions and viewpoints. So we don't need to get
mm,
too into it, too lost in the weeds. But just going back, what we're going to do is we're going
yeah.
to go back to the larger sutra, and we're going to look at those words, and then we're going to see how
What they yeah, what
what
they're
is the
actually
difference.
saying. Yeah. I
What is
remember
going on here?
when I in the most recent, the past however year or so when I started the Fukumoto sequence of reading
Yeah,
the sutras and then going on into Shinron, the collected works of Shinron. Um, I had that experience that I said, yeah, this is very different than things that have been said in different sanghas and groups that
yeah,
I have been in, and connected more naturally and congruously with the intuitive sense that I
yeah,
think Amida is enabling,
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
me to
yeah.
see. And I was like, wow, that is so different than this other stuff.
Yeah.
And again, and that is what it is. That is the key. The key is it's limiting,
Yes.
it's all
Yeah.
limiting. It's like, okay, here's the checklist. If you this, this, and
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then here are the 8 things and the eight
Here's
other things.
the 12 precepts of
And
morality, or what was it?
right, let's bring back the precepts in when there's no precepts.
And
Do you
let's
see?
make new ones up,
Yeah,
which you can't
yeah,
do. There's no way. Nobody can just make stuff
yeah,
up.
yeah. So yeah, it but that
We
is
know
but
what
it
we're
is
talking
limiting,
about.
and that's
We
what it
won't
is.
name
It's that
names.
it's that self power. It is that's what it's that limiting kind of self powery
Yeah.
ego. I gotta
Yeah.
but I gotta do something.
Yeah.
It's samsara, man. I mean, you gotta do something to get something. It's just that's samsara, man.
Just believe. Just believe.
And you gotta make a decision. Make a decision.
Ah, yes. I decide.
Make make a decision. Make a
That's that.
decision.
That's and
Left or
that's really
right.
where it comes down
Left or
to.
right. Left or right.
You know,
Make a decision.
that
Sorry.
is the well. It's great that you said that, because that is really the crux of the issue, and that's where we'll see the difference between the religion of the larger sutra, which Shinron teaches,
Mm,
and then other people's religion.
religion. Yeah.
um,
Ex-
I think there will be some real aha moments.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right. Well, shall
Um,
we? Unless you
yes.
have
Thank
anything
you.
else, maybe we should wrap it up here, and then
Yes.
next episode, let's go ahead and dive into the names. So the third, I believe,
Yes.
part of the
But
fivefold.
you mean next time, next week. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's
Next
because
week.
I
Yeah.
think because with all the tech issues and time, it just, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Next week we'll go back to that, and
All
yeah.
right.
So it seems like this was a good. Once again, um,
Yeah.
things are flowing the way they should flow.
Yes. The flow. The
Let it
Dharma
flow.
flow. We are in the
With the
flow.
waters of the Dharma flow.
Yep.
All
Very
right.
good.
Shall we say some Nembutsu
Yes, we
to
shall.
take us out
All right.
in the best way?
Okay. Namanda.
Nama,
Namanda.
nama, 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 nama.
All right.
Thank you so
See you
much.
later.
Have a
Yep. Thank
great
you. And
rest of your morning, I guess,
yes.
this
And have
point,
a great
and
week.
day, and weekend, and see you next week. All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
See ya. Take care.
Bye for now.